Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome in tonight. Um, it's good to see everyone here. Um, if you're new, just let us know in the chat box. And those of you who are new, welcome to our Medicine Buddha practice for today. And this is a guided practice that that's geared and centered around healing, both individual healing and collective healing as well. So, I'm Lama Rod. Welcome. And welcome back to everyone who's been joining us for a bit. Um, yeah, um, I do want to get to prayer requests tonight. So if you have a prayer request, just something that you're praying for, working with in your practice, please go ahead. If you want, you can put that into the chat box, and I want to read that as we begin our practice today as well. Um, and I want to, especially to a couple of particular prayer requests that I want us to lift up in our practice today. One of which, of course, is offering prayers for for everything that's happening in India with the deaths from COVID. We have members of our sangha who are in India who I've been in communication with, so we want to offer prayers up for that in our practice. Um, we want to actually offer prayers up too for members of our sangha who are doing retreats. Um, Particularly Karen Ziegler, who is usually our tech host for Monday nights, and she's on retreat as well, and also for, of course, for Lama Justin as well, who is still on his 7 week, 49-day dark retreat as well. Of course, I've lost count of the weeks. I think this is like the fourth week. I think maybe he's been in a month. When you go away on like longish retreats, the world kind of forgets about you. you it's a really strange thing. Um, of course, myself spending 3 years in retreat, and just how the world just keeps going, and you think the world is going to stop because you're not in it and you're not participating, right? But the world just continues marching on, and people maybe aren't thinking about you 24/7 like you think they are. Um, so, for me, I just always try to remember people, everyone who's doing sitting retreats, that they are remembered, because retreats, are really about not just about helping ourselves, right, to experience freedom, or balance. It's also about experiencing something that we can offer others, right? So when I think about Lama Justin being in his retreat, it's something that he's doing for us. You know, that is the that expression of bodhicitta where we're practicing not just to free ourselves but to free everyone, right? I can't do freedom work for others unless I'm doing that for myself. Within the bodhisattva tradition, this is where the work has to begin with ourselves, right? And it begins internally, as an internal process. And I'm writing. This is going to be the general topic of my next book, which is the Bodhisattva essentially the Bodhisattva vow, reframing the Bodhisattva vow in a more contemporary way so that people can really like get into it and do it, you know. Um, but of course, for us, in a tradition that is contemplative, we are directing our energy inward into our minds, into our bodies, right? Of course, in this space, we're practicing the tradition of Medicine Buddha. Of course, as we talked about last week and the week before, Medicine Buddha arises out of a very long history of indigenous healing from around the world, not just in Southeast Asia or Tibet or India and so forth, but you know, these practices are these universal practices that are not exclusive to one region of the world, right? The language may be different, particular aspects may be different, right? But this process of working with energy and visualization um, and connecting to the unseen world, these are things that are just echoed throughout the whole world in indigenous cultures throughout history. So that's really important to understand. Um, so, um, so tonight I wanted to actually revisit the practice from last week because I have found that it is very powerful to do something like that right now. And um, the practice of the stream, the river, right, the river that flows, right. Um, and I was um, practicing um, with with the Kashi community down in Florida a couple weeks ago, I guess 2 weeks ago, 2 weekends ago, and just getting back into how Jaya Bhagavati Sati, Ma Jaya Sati Bhagavati, you know, spoke about the river and water and fluidity and the importance of flowing and dancing and moving, because as a yoga master, right, it was like, of course, we're moving, right, but to allow things to flow through us, I guess to step into a stream, right, of Shakti, if we want to use that, the stream of Shakti that moves through our bodies where we open up to this universal kind of cosmic um, divine energy, which I call love, right? I just call it love. Um, to allow that to flow through us and to allow the things that we don't need to hold on to be kind of moved throughout the body, like move through the body, out of the body, um, to be held by the earth. Um, and I wanted to say something too before we begin about practice. Listen, I'm always talking about practice. Practice is important, and and I guess what I want to say, I want to say this as tactfully as possible because sometimes I can keep it too real. I can get, I can, I can keep it too real sometimes. But I'm gonna try to like round off the edges a little bit. But what I want to say, and of course this is coming out of my personal experience. People come to me over and over and over again. So many things, messages and this and that, and of course my capacity to be with people personally, particularly in the teacher-student relationship, is limited, right now, because of the ways in which I am also trying to take care of myself, protect my energy. But everything that I get from folks, it's sometimes, often, I guess often, it comes out of a place of not being with the practice long enough, not sitting with the practice and doing practice long enough. And I think about, and I want to think about my earlier days in my 20s when I first started coming into serious practice, and how, like, my teachers and elders and mentors, that I was very fortunate to be surrounded by in my community, how they would just be like, you would ask questions, they would freely offer answers to these questions around meditation and so forth. And then they would say, and you have to practice this, right? And then, oh no, over time, they would just be like, are you practicing? Like, what is your practice? Like, are you actually doing the basics, of working through the practice? And of course, coming into Vajrayana tantric practice, like what we're going to do tonight and what I do, it's so much about faith and trust, and that was, my practice, the barriers in my practice were really about the ways in which I just didn't feel safe enough to trust the practice, to trust myself, to trust the teacher, right? And I knew that, like, that was something that I had to really work with, and I had to take that struggle, of course, into a 3 year retreat. And in that situation, I had to really confront, you know, how my lack of trust or my unwillingness to trust was actually an expression of trauma, for me, because, you know, I believe that when I trusted myself or others, that I would be heard, and I felt that heard. When I imagined what it felt like to open up and trust and devotion, really, when I just simply imagined that, I also felt this intense anxiety, right? Where I was like, I can't do this. I can't possibly open up. I can't possibly trust this practice. I can't possibly trust myself. And that was something that I knew I had to continue to work with. And I invested a lot of energy in that. And of course, this idea of devotion, which I've talked about a lot, is really about, first and foremost, can I trust myself to be in a liberatory relationship with not with the teacher, not with the person, but can I trust myself to be in a liberatory relationship with phenomenal reality itself, right? How can I trust reality to help get me free? How can I trust phenomena to help move me through the suffering, the pain, the grief? You know, can I rely on this? Because when I look, when some of us look at the world, we see the world as being antagonistic. We see the world as being dangerous. We see phenomena as being dangerous, right? How do I shift that perspective and begin to trust the world, right? Because within tantric perspective, particularly Buddhist tantric, tradition, all of phenomenal reality is actually pointing us back to its essential nature, to its essence. Even violence, right? Even sickness, right? Death, right? All these things are pointing us back to the essence of everything, to the emptiness, the space, to this energetic potential, right? Which is how I describe in my teaching the nature of reality. It's emptiness, it's space, it's potential. Of course, that potentiality is what gives rise to phenomena, right? Space and emptiness and potentiality give rise, and the space itself, you know, um, is what continues to facilitate the condition of arising. And also, falling, rising and falling, what the law, right, and in the phenomenal world is that what goes up must come down. You know, what starts has to end, right? What's born will have to die, right? That's the basic law, particularly of the phenomenal world. Um, and how do you trust that, right? Particularly when we talk about birth and death, right? I think sometimes what really gets us is that we forget that we're going to die, right? Like we spend a whole bunch of time celebrating our birthdays every year, except for me. I don't really celebrate my birthday. I don't. I'm not really like interested in my birthday. Um, I'm interested in people sending me gifts and wishing me happy birthday. But you get those happy birthdays on Facebook, and you only get those happy birthdays because Facebook reminds you. So I feel like all of that's artificial. But again, that's not the point of tonight. So I'm going to come back to the point, which is that we forget that we're going to die, and it's such a surprise. Such a surprise, like that we forget, the this fundamental relationship, that whatever is born, that as we're born, we also are dying, at the same time. And because of this forgetting of death, we don't really prepare for death, right? Because we don't prepare for death, we're afraid of death. And because we're afraid of death, we actually don't really get what death is. You know, it's hard to understand something that we're terrified of. You know, because if you're terrified of something, you don't want to get close to it. Like you don't want to get near it. And we have to get close to death to understand death, to understand the illusion of death. The illusion of death is just the illusion of everything. Like everything is an illusion. So death is actually an illusion itself. But we don't get that, right? And I think that's why there's so much emphasis on death and dying, which I appreciate. you know, I appreciate the emphasis on death, particularly in tantric traditions, because it's like when we understand death, we begin to understand life and vice versa. When we understand life and begin to live life, we actually are at the same time facing death, preparing for death, and dying. You know, and working with a lot of young folks. Now that I'm in my 40s, anyone in their 20s is a young folk. Of course, those of you in your 60s and 70s think people in their 40s are young folks. So it's all relative. But in my location, if you're younger than 30, you're young people. But one of the things working with young folks is that God, I mean, youth is such a barrier to practice. Again, this comes out of my experience as well. The youth is like you just um, for many people, not everyone, but for many people, there's this perspective that, oh, I'm young, I'm going to live forever, and that gets in the way of practice. It really does. As someone who started practice in their early 20s, and um, I know what it's like to give up time that you could be at the club or at the parties, to give up that time and have to go sit a weekend retreat or have to go to a week long somewhere, having to skip the night at the bar, to sit at home and do practice. I get that, and I had to do that. And I did that because I was suffering and I couldn't avoid suffering, you know. Nothing in my life disrupted the experience of suffering except for this like meditation and Buddhism stuff that I was being taught and introduced to. Of course, by the end of my 20s, right, I was living in a monastery and going into retreat, which everyone, all my friends thought was quite extreme. But by that time, by my late 20s, I was absolutely certain that I would not be able to make it this far in my life, into my early 40s, if I didn't take that 3 years at the end of my 20s to dedicate to practice. While the rest of my friends went off and, went, onto, graduate schools and deepening careers and buying houses and having families or just, continuing to party, right? I was sitting my ass in retreat. Um, a choice that I will never regret in my life, because it has that deep practice has instilled in me this way of being and living that has been transformative for me to be in the world right now. For me to be in the world and having had that experience, I feel, extremely prepared for everything. And not that I don't struggle, not that I don't, have a lot of bumps, but I can meet those bumps. I can metabolize all of this, you know. Um, but this hasn't come. This has only come because of practice. And I know practice is a huge obstacle for many of us, but you have to get to the point where you just have to do it. I spend a lot of time trying to come up with spiritual hacks to get people practicing and engaged. And this, well, in a way, this is a spiritual hack right tonight. Um, but at the end of the day, like practice it's not going to be so glamorous and sexy, right? It's not going to be, even though some of our social media influences make practice real sexy and real glamorous. I may be one of those people, but I may make it look cool, but that illusion of non-effort comes out of staggering effort that I've had to put in over these 2 decades now of formal practice. Um, this isn't, whatever I do comes out of a lot of training, comes out of a lot of being with teachers, all over in India and Tibet and here, you know. Um, and of course, some of that has been Lama Justin dragging me around the world to go and see teachers, know. Um, Justin's very much an adventurer. I'm not, I'm not an adventurer, not like that. Um, but I like to partner with adventurers because, they motivate me to go do all this stuff, right? And early in my practice, right, I just had mentors who were just dragging me along to do all this stuff, to do this retreat and go see that teacher and to read that book and to do this practice. Without those folks in my life, who knows what I would have been exposed to. Um, but the practice, you just have to do it, you know. And it's not gonna be fun. Like I don't practice isn't fun for me. I'm beyond fun. You know, I watch Golden Girls, and go to Target to have fun, right? And I know that sounds bad. It works for me. I went to a Target. I went to a new Target yesterday outside, on Saturday outside of Atlanta, which is a really nice Target. Um, and I just felt so much joy in that Target. Again, that's not the point of what I'm talking about right now. But to get back to the point is that I don't practice to have fun. You know, um, like I just practice is just like breathing for me, right? It's it's just what I do. Like it's not I don't have fun breathing. It's necessary. It's necessary. It's critical, right? I don't sit around and say, "Oh, breathing is really fun. It's really hot. It's really sexy." You know, um, I don't sit around and say that. I say, "Oh, I'm just breathing. This is part of just what I do, right? It's part of um, I guess the autonomic system that I'm just breathing. It's something I don't think about. I have to think my body's programmed to take in oxygen, to exhale carbon, right? And the same thing with practice. I've just become programmed just to lean towards awareness, right? To lean towards knowingness, to lean towards compassion instead of hate, to lean towards love, instead of whatever, you know, opposite of love is hate again. To lean towards what's liberatory and conducive and fluid and expansive instead of being shoved towards what feels rigid and tight and shut down and closed. And this is what we're trying to do in spaces like this is what we're trying to do tonight. This is what practice like this are about. It's about moving into fluidity and expansion and openness, right? It's about being taken to these expressions of who we are that aren't so centered around the sense of self and ego. And you can't get there without effort and diligence, right? And I can do my part to get you there, you know? I mean, I can do what I can to get you there, but you have to do labor as well. Like, you have to do labor to sustain the experiences, and I just, one of the things that I fear from people, that I've seen with other practitioners in other spaces and traditions is that they rely on the teacher to take them somewhere, but they don't cultivate, the capacity to continue that work for themselves. You know, um, I love just being blissed out when I do Kundalini. I love Kundalini. I have a lot of strong experiences in the awakening of Kundalini. Like, that's all really wonderful, and I love being with teachers who can initiate that. But it doesn't mean anything if I can't maintain that practice on my own. You know, Kundalini is just actually just pointing us and exposing us to the reality of things, the essence of things, right? That opening, that expansion, that invitation to touch into the non-linear, to the timelessness, right? To step outside of time. Um, that's what we're trying to do and sustaining our practice. Is what we're doing here is to step outside of the linear into the non-linear, right? To step outside of the conceptual into the non-conceptual, and to see that as our, um, I guess as Thich Nhat Hanh has said, to see that as our true face. Or did I say that once? I know I have a article called "Do You Know Your True Face?" I guess that's from Thich Nhat Hanh. Anywho, um, to see our true nature, to experience. You don't see it. It's not seeing. It's not using our senses. It's experiencing. It's being. It's embodying our true nature. That openness. That expansion. The to experience what can't be articulated. Um, that's what we're hungry for. You know, we're hungry, we're thirsty for that space that can't be articulated. And of course, I call that space many things. One of the things I call that space is the mother, or we can call it Buddha nature, we can call it the essence of the mind, or essence of reality. It's all the same. Or you can call that space God, meeting God, you know, not this like dude sitting on a throne in heaven. I'm sure there is a heaven where there's someone sitting on a throne, but what we're doing is going beyond that. As we say in the Gate mantra, in the Heart Sutra, we go beyond. You know, we're trying to go beyond heaven. You know, it's great to end up in a heaven. There's lots of Buddhist heavens, and that's great. But that's not where we're staying, right? It's a great place to be to practice, but we want to excel beyond heaven. We want to excel beyond the Messiah. We have to go beyond heaven, beyond Messiah, beyond phenomena, beyond the trauma, to transcend the trauma. And it's a hard thing to do, particularly trauma, well, all phenomena reality, and samsara as well. Samsara being this reality, this reality that's based on delusion. It's hard to transcend samsara and delusion, because samsara and this delusion is so seductive, right? It's like a really yummy, delicious dessert, you know, or no, whatever turns you on is that. you know, I realize that like cakes don't turn some of you on, um, but for me, a cake does turn me on. You know, it's like samsara. Samsara is like this really yummy, delicious cake, like a French cake, like a French dessert, or an Italian dessert, and it's just irresistible. It's irresistible. It's sweet, it's yummy, it looks good, right? But is it going to actually help you get free, right? If you eat it, is eating that going to help you get free, or is there something else beyond this? So I say all of that, to even just like focus it even more. We can't get distracted by these like worldly desires, right? Because if we're not skillful with desire, it's going to keep us trapped in this reality, and it's not going to help us to transcend. And what we're trying to do in Tantra is to go into the essence of desire, to go into the essence of pleasure, to use pleasure, desire, everything as the vehicle to get free. That's what Tantra is, particularly Buddhist Tantra. That's what we're trying to do. Is not to get attached to the bliss, to the happiness, to the pleasure, not to get attached to it, but to allow it to be, and to say, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is great." Like you can eat the cake, right? You can eat the cake and just experience the pleasure of the cake, but you're not getting attached to it. And if you don't get attached to it, then that pleasure actually begins to lead you into the essence, right? It begins to lead you into this transcending out of these base desires into what can be articulated beyond pleasure, right? Again, many of us stop at pleasure. You know, you stop at pleasure, but what I'm interested in is what's beyond pleasure, what's beyond the bliss, what's beyond the happiness. In the same way, I ask myself, what's beyond the trauma, what's beyond the hate, what's beyond the grief, to go beyond, right? To keep going beyond, until this whole thing of going anywhere is completely exhausted. Until there's nowhere to go. But in reality, there's nowhere to go now. you know, to go beyond, and right now for most of us, samsara is like the snake charmer, and it's charming us. We're so charmed by samsara, you know, like we're so deep in it that we don't get it, right? And that's where many of you are. Quite honestly, to be quite frank about it, it's where many of you are. You're so deep in the trauma, and then someone comes and tells you about liberation, and you're like, fuck you. Fuck you, go away. You know. I say that because I've been there before, right? Where I thought I knew everything, right? The other part about being a young practitioner is that you think you know every fucking thing. Oh, um, no one can tell you anything. You get like half of a teaching, and then all of a sudden you're like a meditation master. Listen, I've been there and I've done it, right? And it's all just this trick. And it's just the ego working as well. Because the ego is an expression of samsara. The ego is working really hard. It's working hard because we invest in it. The ego isn't this self-existing entity that's like calling the shots and we can't get detached from it. The ego is, we're feeding the ego. The ego is just a thought that we're investing in over and over again. As long as we say, this is who I am, then that feeds the ego over and over again. And so when we go into the ultimate, or when we go into the space, into the expanse, you're actually transcending ego, and that's terrifying. And that's a wall that some of you have to confront as well. That's a real obstacle, the terror that keeps us in the rigidity and that keeps us from moving into the space, the expansion. And you know when you hit that, when you hit that wall, right? That terror, when you get too far away from the ego, you're like, okay, what the hell am I doing? I didn't sign up for this. What's happening? You know. Again, the trust. Who are you trusting? What are you trusting? You know. And for me, I'm not someone who is necessarily tricked so much by samsara anymore. I'm not tricked by ego so much. I can consume the terror, and I can sashay right into that experience of what can't be articulated, of the unarticulable, you know, and it's fine because I've trained to do that, and I've gone through the trauma. I've done the work around. I've done work around trauma for myself, for my ancestors, for my descendants. Like trauma is the second language for me. I know trauma. I get trauma. I can move beyond the trauma. I can name the trauma. I still experience trauma, but the trauma isn't the totality of my experience. It's just this one experience that's happening. But gratitude is also happening. Happiness is also happening. Joy is also happening. Grief is also happening. It's just all these things are happening, but I'm not trying to come from those spaces. I'm trying to come from the space. I'm trying to come from the Buddha nature or God or the mother, right? I'm trying to come from the liberation instead of from the constriction, the contraction, the rigidity. You have to make a choice at some point, right? Like you have to choose to do something different. Even if you can't do more than make a choice. Sometimes, yeah, we sometimes we get to this place where we're like, okay, I want to do this. I want to live beyond the trauma, but you can't do that. But it's important to start with the aspiration, with the choice. I'm choosing to do this. Some of you haven't even done that. As my early teachers would always tell me, they're like, Rod, you have to like want. You have to want to be free to start with. Like you have to want to transcend. So yeah, you have to say it. Like I want to be free. I want to be free of the anger, of the hate, of the grief, of the trauma. Like you have to start saying that every day. That becomes a prayer and aspiration. I want to be free. And we understand that freedom doesn't mean that things are going to disappear. It means that we begin to grow. We get our capacity widens. Our the spaciousness deepens, it grows, and it begins to hold much more, right? And we find that when we have more space, we're not so likely to react. Reactivity is what evaporates the space, right? And again, this is all an illusion because space is always present, but our awareness of space is compromised through habitual reactivity, just reacting to things over and over and over again because there's no space in reactivity, but there is space in responding. We can't respond until we have the space to choose how we're going to react to something. That's the response that we're trying to move towards. But again, it has to begin with the aspiration that I want to be free. Of course, when I was growing up, we would say, I want to be born again. Everyone wanted to be born again. Everyone wanted to be a born again Christian. It's very similar. Like, yeah, to be born again, but to be free. To be free of the old self, to be free of the ways in which I'm trying to colonize the world through my trauma, or I'm trying to colonize groups from my place of trauma or relationships. You know, and it's a hard conversation. Well, it's a hard thing to become aware of, right? For us to start becoming aware of the ways in which our trauma, is charming us. That we're seduced by the trauma in a way that we can't even name it anymore. And so when do you choose to be free, right? When are you going to choose it? I mean, when are you gonna say the word, right? As we used to say growing up, when are you going to say the word? Because the word is actually a phrase, right? Like, I want to be free. That's the word. That's the good word. That is the gospel. That is the good news when we say, I want to be free. That I am suffering and I am creating suffering for others. And I want to be free and I want others to be free. You know? And then you have to do the work after that. And you can say anything that you want to about me, which I don't really give a shit anymore. You can say what you need to say about me, but you will never say, you know, there will never be truth around anyone saying that I have not worked, right? That I have not put in the effort, every day, you know, in every single way I put in the effort to get free, to do what I can to free oths. Yeah, and maybe I don't offer some of you what you need. And that's okay because this isn't about you getting all your needs met from me either, you know. But for me, it's about knowing that I'm working to free myself and as many people as possible. So I mean, you'll see me do lots of stuff, in the world in the coming months. Kind of super flashy stuff, with some celebrities. I have some celebrity things coming up and, social media stuff I'm trying to get back into and this and that and some media. Like, you're going to see all of that, but you have to be very careful when you look at that, and not to assume that Rod hasn't done the labor. This isn't a performance. I like to have fun. Don't get me wrong, I love to have fun, um, but I know how to have fun and I also know how to do the work at the same time. And I'll say this, and then we're gonna get into our practice. I never know what time we end. Like it's just always like, you know, sometime between 8 and 8:30. So don't worry, we'll be done by 8:30. Um, but in college, I had this friend who was like brilliant. Like I'm not like brilliant. You know. But I had a friend who was like just brilliant and just like it's like an undergrad. Like some of you are these people. So like that kind of person in undergrad, like you're just like a freshman or a sophomore, but you have friends your age who are just plotted out their whole life. They're like graduate school and PhD programs and where they're going to get tenured and books and everything. This was my friend who had plotted out all of this. She knew what she was going to become. And then one day we were sitting in class before class starts, and she looks at me. She goes, "Rod," and I was like, "What?" you know, she was like, "Rod, listen, I work hard and I play hard." And I swear that was like the first Dharma teaching that I can ever remember getting in my life. When she looked at me and just said, I work hard and I play hard, you know. And she was not telling a lie because we would party together. We would party together. Like it was unreal. And maybe I didn't work as hard as she did, but and she works. She would be on top of it in class, and then we would be, at the bar on the weekends. As the monastics at my monastery used to say, they used to have this phrase, to talk about when we were doing things that weren't like virtuous, you know, they would say, "Oh, you were just wasting your precious human life." So we spent a lot of time wasting our precious human life together, and it was fun, But I learned that. I learned like there has to be a balance, So as I work hard, I'm going to play hard. Of course, that play can be ethical and nonviolent as well. Anyway, um, why did I talk for a whole hour? I started this saying that we're gonna practice for the whole hour, but I want to go to 8:30 tonight just to let people know. I know it's always confusing about when we end, but I want to go to 8:30, and I want to begin our practice. And again, I want to go back to last week's practice. If you've been practicing it, great. We're going to go right back into it because I think it's really important. And it's a really nice, simple practice for those of us who are new to this tradition. Okay? So, beginning, allowing your bodies to come into a position that feels appropriate. Let's turn our attention to our aspiration, right? Again, I want you to just really reflect on this aspiration that you're practicing right now to get free, to free yourself and to free others. And go and sit. Go and just plop yourself in that aspiration. Don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Just like sit in it. Say, I am practicing to get free and to get other people free, and just let it go and sit right in it. And for some of us, that's going to take us to an openness, a spaciousness. This is the basic training in bodhicitta and this aspiration to free ourselves and others. Again, just say the word. I want to be free and I want others to be free. And if you have the capacity right now to turn your attention towards the breath, I invite you just to begin to notice the breath. If you can't be with the breath, really turn your attention to something that feels more neutral, like maybe the weight of your body on the seat, or maybe a very neutral part of your body, or maybe a sound in the space around you if you can't be with the breath. But if you're able to be with the breath, just noticing the in breath and the out breath. Allowing the breath to deepen. So, really taking our time to inhale deeply, extending the exhale as well. Shifting our attention down to the heart center now. Again, if you're able to be with the breath, just imagining breathing in and out of the heart center. And if you're not able to be with the breath, just shifting your attention to the heart center, not focusing on the breath, but just noticing that part of the body if it feels neutral for you. And I invite you to begin reflecting on gratitude. What are you grateful for? Who are you grateful for? Maybe reflecting on all the ways that you're the recipient of labor and kindness from countless people around you and beings, not just people, but beings. Formed beings as well as formless beings. All this labor and kindness for our protection, our safety, our well-being. Realizing that we would not have the quality of the life that we have now without the labor and kindness of countless beings. Can you reflect on that and allow yourself to sit within that reflection. And can that energy of gratitude begin to fill your experience? And again, returning to the breath, transitioning into what we would call a central channel breath. So beginning to breathe up and down the spine, which corresponds to the central channel that runs from the top of the head down to our tailbone. So we're inhaling up the spine to the top of the head, exhaling back down to the tailbone. And in this breath, we begin to open up this passage of energy that we're going to start working with soon. Again, inhaling up, exhaling down. So a few more breaths. Okay. Let's transition and shift our attention to the space above our heads, just at the top of our heads. It doesn't have to be far, maybe a foot or less. And in that space above our heads, I invite you to begin to imagine this expression of the healer. And you can imagine actual medicine Buddha appearing above our heads. Of course, medicine Buddha is a Buddha, blue in color, with golden robes, sitting on a lotus seat, glowing radiance. Or we can imagine the the embodiment of a healer that we're drawn to. It can be a teacher, a guide, it can be a spirit, a deity, an actual person, maybe, who is a healer for us, an elder or an ancestor. It can actually be like a crystal, like this, something, some type of healing object that we can imagine above our heads. Just some object that radiates, that holds this intense healing and also compassionate energy for us. And above our heads, we can also imagine just this expansive, expression of the mother, of God. So right now, for me, I'm imagining one of my teachers. I'm actually imagining Majai Sati Bhagavati just sitting above my head. We begin to imagine that this being above our heads begins to deepen their compassion for us, their care for us. And that deepening of care and compassion triggers this deep radiance of white, soft light that begins to radiate from their bodies. So they become like the moon above our heads, radiating this soft white light that begins to maybe fill our space up. It begins to illuminate our space. And slowly this light begins to drift from this being, this embodiment of healing above our heads, and it begins to actually drift, float down, pour into our bodies. Down into the central channel that we've been breathing through. It begins to slowly fill up our bodies. And as this light begins to fill up our bodies begin to glow. We become illumined, illuminate. And this soft white light begins to dissolve. Experiences of suffering, and this is the point of the practice where we begin to trust the power of the practice, that this is actually happening for us, that we're being filled by this luminous light, this soft white light that's beginning to heal us, that begins to take care of us. And as we begin the first part of our mantra, we're going to split the mantra into two parts tonight. So in our first part of our mantra tonight, we're just going to sit and allow ourselves to feel the radiant healing of this blessing from the healer, from the medicine Buddha above our heads. Allowing ourselves to sit within this energy, to be cared for by this energy. And moving into medicine Buddha's mantra, Teata Bekenze, Maha Bekenze, Ratsa Sumungate Soha. 오 제야 자운백연세 백연세 마백연세 라수수문가 제소아 제야 자운백연세 백연세 마백연세 라수수문가 제소아 제야 자운백연세 백연세 마백연세 란수수문가 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 제소아 제야 자운백연세 백연세 마백연세 라수수문가 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 제소아 제야 자운백연세 begenze, ma begenze, lazo sumangale zoa. Teata begenze, 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 begenze, ma begenze, lazo sumangale zoa. And just staying in the practice, I want to just transition into just offering prayers. And as I offer the prayers, I want you to imagine that this healing, that actually, as I offer the prayers, I want you to imagine that the situations, the folks that we're praying for, that these situations, these people begin to appear within your heart center, and that this radiance, this light that we're deeply embodying right now, that they begin to be infused with the same light. So as we move from prayer to prayer, all these situations, these beings are appearing within our heart centers, being deeply infused by this healing white, soft light from the medicine Buddha, from our healer above our heads, and then just letting it go, letting those folks, those situations go as we move from situation, from prayer request to prayer request. And begin to offer these prayer requests to all the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, to the Dharma protectors, to all deities, beings who have gathered with us in our practice to protect us, to keep us safe, and to benefit all beings, to help all beings to obtain liberation and freedom. We pray that you move into the prayer requests that have been offered by this community tonight to remove obstacles, to awaken energies, and to benefit as many beings as possible. And we begin to offer prayers for Kelly Cross, who's having 2 heart procedures this week on Wednesday and Thursday. We're offering prayers for the best therapist and healer for myself at this time. We're offering prayers for Santanisha during their relocation from Zoenda, DeClane, Violet, and Garrett as they find new ways to be for family. For myself, that I may continue to practice and cultivate acceptance. Offering prayers for all indigenous peoples who suffered and still suffer the effects of forced residential schooling. Offering prayers for all who are afraid and alone, sick, without resources, and imprisoned. Offering resources for Thamkrana, Viva Keller, for Khalid and Alexa, for Betty and Cindy. Prayers for myself, juggling many things inwardly and outwardly. Offering prayers for Madeline, for Cameron, suffering physical illnesses, that they receive and feel whatever energy they need for healing, for Ariel and for family as they make the transitions to their new life in the United States. We're offering prayer for Robbie C., who died of an overdose Friday evening, and for all those who struggle deeply with addiction. Offering prayers for myself and any others who are moving through difficult change, growth, and healing in different areas of life. May we move through fear and pain to liberation. Offering prayers for Roman Prasvich, the journalist imprisoned in Belarus. Offering prayers for the families of Khalif Brada and Leyland Polanco, who both died as a result of solitary confinement on June 6th and 7th in past years. Prayers for all those in solitary tonight. May solitary confinement come to an end everywhere. Offering prayers for my mother Carol, who passed on May 19th. May she be safe, protected, and liberated through the bardo. A prayer for my upcoming heart procedure. May it be successful. Offering prayers for my aunt as she continues chemotherapy, and prayers for Nona as she heals from a broken elbow. Offering prayer for my community who are mourning the loss of Leah Gold. I continue to offer prayers for all members of our community on retreat tonight. I continue to offer prayers for all beings who struggle and survive all acts of violence around the world, both in this world and in other worlds. I offer a prayer for all beings who are transitioning into the bardo, the spirit world, that their path is illumined, that they receive all the resources that they need to have a supported transition, and may they, as quickly as possible be enlightened or obtain another precious human birth. They're able to continue their work towards liberating themselves and others. For all the prayers that we've offered, may all obstacles for ourselves and for those we've offered prayers for be completely eliminated. May the intense illumination of healing dissolve all violence, all hunger, all grief, all anxiety, all fear. And may we all be free. And may it always be so. And as we move into this next part of our mantra, just for a couple of minutes, I invite you to imagine that this light that we're deeply embodying, that's filling our bodies up, that this light also begins to illuminate all the beings, again, who are transitioning into the bardo or into the after-death experience or the spirit world. Even particularly folks who have passed on, who are connected to us, who are still maybe around us, that we, in this next part of our mantra, begin to invite them to move on into the spirit world, if they're ready to do so. And to imagine that all beings who maybe are stuck in this plane beyond their consent, that they are able to be released, are able to enter into the spirit world with no obstacles. And may all formless beings be freed and able to continue their transition. 오제야 자음배근세 배근세 마배근세 라스 숨은가 제소아 제야 자음배근세 배근세 마배근세 라스 숨은가 제소아 제야자온 백연세 백연세 마백연세 라스수문가래 좋아 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 제야자온 백연세 백연세 마백연세 라스수문가래 좋아. And lastly, for the last few moments of our practice, I want you to imagine that all the energy that you've been holding and processing and moving through, that you begin to release it down through your body into the earth, where the earth will begin to hold it and instantly purify whatever energy that we feel maybe is negative. Letting the earth do its work of just holding the energy, settling the energy, and beginning to feel that stream of energy moving through the body, cleansing both the energy body and the physical body, and releasing that energy down into the earth. Okay. Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Theater Begenze, Begenze, ma Begenze, lass es tun, Gott ist so. Releasing whatever left over energy down into the earth. Releasing, letting go. Returning our attention to the seats, noticing the weight of our bodies, making contact with the seats. We thank the earth for supporting us and holding us during this practice. We thank the seat for supporting us as well. We offer appreciation to our bodies for being a vehicle for practice. We offer appreciation to our breath for sustaining us. We offer appreciation to our minds for being awakened. We offer appreciation to our teachers, mentors, elders, guides, ancestors, and descendants for their support, their teaching. We offer appreciation to this virtual community who have joined together in this space to practice the profound Dharma together. We offer appreciation back to ourselves for our diligence, for our effort, for our interest in liberation, for ourselves and for others. We turn our attention now to Shantideva's prayer. To close with that, and we're going to recite this 3 times together, and that's going to appear in the chat box for everyone to notice, to see. Where we begin, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all the sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And finally, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be may I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all the sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your practice. Sorry for going over a little bit. Thank you all so much for being here today. And again, this recording is also available. So please come back, and practice this and work with it whenever you need to. Um, and we will meet again in some form or fashion. Um, Maybe one day in person. Okay. All right. I'll see you all later. Oh, and as you sign off, I know sometimes I don't remember to say this, but go, please do some movement practice. Please, if it's dancing, I'm about to have a dance party, right? Do some movement, take a walk, do some asana, do some dancing, get some water. Those are the big things that we should be doing after our practice tonight, okay? Because we did move a lot of energy around. I can feel that from a lot of folks. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll talk to you and see you, practice with you in the future. Okay. Bye.